hosts. So my name is Megan Davis. I'm the Senior Manager of Brand Marketing here at Wacom, and of course joined by Brad and Sean. I will let the two of them do intros in a minute, but we've got so much knowledge here today. Again, just really excited to share this information with y'all. For those that don't know, since the launch of the most current Cintiq Pro, we've been doing a lot in the virtual production space. And so as you tap into virtual production, of course, you look at topics of color accuracy. What am I looking at in camera? What am I looking at with my own eyes? And what do I see on screen? So we're going to dig into the importance of those color standards and how to kind of dial those components in. I am not the pro to speak on this. This is why Brad is here. What do we have on the next slide there, Brad? I think we've got about 60 minutes. 1 hour session planned. We're going to save the last 10 minutes for Q&A. Again, let's use the Q&A portal for those questions. We will do our best to get to every question as they come through. And yeah, that's about it. And again, we will record and share this. Since we are recording, and for folks that do submit questions, we'll try to do our best just to answer those questions live. If we happen to type a reply to you, just know that your name will be visible to the group. So if you want to change your name, have like a cool code name, that's also fine. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Brad and Sean. I don't know, Sean, do you want to do an intro first, and then we can hand it over to Brad, and then...
Oh, let's go ahead with Brad. It's okay.
You want to go Brad first? Okay.
Yeah, we kind of tag team together, so it'll be a joint discussion.
Love it. And I'm going to turn my camera off as to not distract anyone from the important lessons we're about to learn.
I think it's more about how Brad and I came together and formed this company out of education.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of our key focuses with Calibrated Technology. Sean and I are partners in this. We have a background in broadcast. I was a senior lighting director at Canadian Broadcasting Corporation 37 years. Also a technical instructor there, worked with virtual sets, worked with previs, all that sort of stuff. And Sean and I align because we have similar backgrounds and we believe that education is key in all of this. So I'll throw it off to Sean and you can do a quick roundup.
Yeah, so we started Calibrated Technologies really out of the absence in the last few years of what we saw as standards and practices common to the industry for many, many years. But with the advent of online education and lots of LinkedIn items, we started to see that a lot of this knowledge had been misplaced or overlooked. And so it was quite important that we share some of the resources and share some of the techniques that we weren't seeing that were absolutely a must within the color pipeline. We hear the word color science often, and I think there's a problem there for Brad and I because we don't see much science in a lot of these things. Science has to do with standards and measurements. It has to do with scientific instruments like scopes, meters, and other types of regulated products that are used in a technical atmosphere to measure for accuracy. So when we talk about color accuracy, we're talking about specific types of devices and especially standards and practices bodies, the formal bodies and governance bodies that oversee that. And that's something that we're trying to bring together back into the community and make sure that people are aware of those resources. So when they do look at some of these things, they have something to go up against and say, I don't see much standards and practices being used or adhered to here. And I think you're going to get a lot of that out of this webinar today. Yeah. Brad, you want to take off?
No, I was going to say, and very quickly to let everybody know, this is not a Zoom background. This is a virtual production studio I'm in. They have adopted the practices exactly what Sean and I are talking about. They've calibrated everything to the camera. They've done the practices that we're going to talk about here. So let's start off about the fact that we have visual color, right? And we have many ways to measure that. Again, when the receptor is your eye, right, you have to understand what the eye can see. And when we start talking about color and the spectrum is that on the either ends of the spectrum, the eye is not as sensitive to it, whereas in the center, it is. So again, there's some little bit of unique qualities with regards to the eye. You've got to be aware of that. Now, again, dealing with the eye, there's a number of different ways of measuring light or measuring color, and they're all valid. But again, what is the receptor? In this case, the receptor is the eye. The same thing with light. We can measure light in a number of different ways, and that's all fine. They're all valid. But again, what does all this sort of do is it sits back and said we're measuring the light itself. How does that apply to the camera, right? And of course, some various things we have to know about light of the fact is if we have deficiency in light, and as things go more to LEDs, you do have LEDs that are some deficiencies, that essentially the portion of the spectrum, if it's not there, it doesn't get sent back to us, right? It doesn't get sent back to the camera. And what happens is, for example, if we have only red light lighting a red ball, it looks even redder. If we have a green light lighting a red ball and there's no red, we get black. So again, we have to have the full portion of the spectrum. Okay, so long short of it, measurements that we're talking about for your eye, for the light and all that stuff is all before the camera sensor. What we're going to talk about now, because this is the whole thing, the camera sensor is the gateway into the color pipeline. And in this case, you have light falling on an image sensor and it gets transferred into electronic signal, breaking it into luminance and chroma. So it's not color, it's voltage. So in reality, it's transferred into a voltage level that, again, a scope can read, and your device at the end, being a monitor, etc., has to discern as to what that voltage amount means. That's why you turn around and you can measure it in such things in scopes. And how does that work on the image sensor? So again, we're just going to gloss over something really quickly, but in a single chip bare filter camera, what you have is photodiodes that essentially when light hits it, it creates an electronic signal. Now, if you want to separate the different specific light, is you put in front of the photodiodes a filter. So therefore only red can get through, or only green, or only blue. And you have different manufacturers doing different forms of that. If you had none of these filters in the front, all you'd be is like, it would be like a solar panel. Light's hitting it, it creates current, but how do you discern when you start breaking it down, well, what portion of the light is hitting it? And again, very quickly, when we start doing color sampling, again, when we start, if we want to take all the information that we have from the sensor, that's great, but there's a lot of data there, and it ends up being, well, we may not be able to store it, we may not be able to work with it, et cetera. So this is why what happens is you, in some cases, you take portions of that information and you make assumptions as to what the color is. So again, we start talking about 444, 422, 420. And again, 420 is why are you going that way? Again, just less data stored. Of course, we talk about bits and 8-bit, 10-bit, and of course it goes in 12-bit, it goes higher. What it means is the gradation between the different colors becomes greater as your bit depth increases. Okay, now I just showed very quickly a single chip bare filter camera. That's fine, there's all variations of that. We now have a 3-chip prism camera, which has a dichroic filter in there and a prism, which sends the RGB to the different chips, the 3 chips that are there. So again, similar to the bare filter, it separates light into its spectral elements of R, G, and B. Okay, now here's the point. Measurements are important, so are standards. So for example, this is a carpenter. They built that door in their workshop by eye, right? That's the whole point. Is that you'd never expect a carpenter to turn into that. It's like they'd use measurements and standards. And yet, we're on set so many times, oh no, I got a good eye, we're doing it by eye, we're doing this. It's like, excuse me, you can actually measure. If you have voltage, you can actually measure that. And that's the whole point. And guess what? Just like temperature, weight, speed, measurement and distance, there's actually international bodies that have set these standards.
And let's not forget, we're talking also, Brad, you skipped over a little bit in the beginning, these measurement standards, the things that people are measuring are correct. We're seeing that often
Yes,
in a lot of these presentations, but they're not measuring after the camera. Those,
exactly.
what you know, the specs that you're reading on lights and all of these presentations about lights, those are using your eye, and they're also pertaining to a spec with that light, but it doesn't pertain to the end, the
Yes.
application, which is behind the camera. Can you just touch on that before going forward?
Sure. And that's the key, that essentially light gets transferred to an electronic signal. So it's actually the interaction of that light with the sensor that we're looking at. So and we're going to get into it a little bit later. When we start throwing numbers around, we'll start seeing on camera, those numbers don't necessarily come true. And that's the whole thing. When we talked about luminance and chroma in that signal that we can measure it, we're going to go into that with the scopes and showing how important that is to actually measure and validate what the light is saying. So a prime example here is that we have the Kelvin temperature thrown around all the time. Oh, this is so many degrees Kelvin. This is so many degrees Kelvin. We hear it all the time. Well, Kelvin is not just a light term. It's actually a temperature. So literally, a Kelvin degree is light produced through heat. And if I can go up and touch a light, guess what? Pretty well doesn't have a Kelvin temperature. It has a correlated color temperature, right? And it used to be called an apparent color temperature. So those two get sort of mixed in together. And what does that mean? So for example, if we have a correlated color temperature, we can be above or below the black body radiator curve, which means it can go into the green and go into magenta, it can shift off, but it still have the same number. And that's, again, the problem with dealing with numbers is like, oh, it's so many degrees Kelvin. It's like, well, no, it's correlated color temperature. We'll see this all the time with LEDs. It's like, no, actually, let's break that down a little bit further. So that way you start knowing what the deficiencies of the light are. Okay, and we talked about standards. Well, here's a prime example. We have actually a vectorscope on the right. And what does that show? That shows our hue and saturation values. And what that also says is how much saturation there is. Well, guess what? This is not an arbitrary number. It's actually determined by the ITU, it's the International Telecommunications Union, which is based on the voltage it's receiving. So again, hue is a specific voltage, right? And the same thing with regards to the saturation. So we're looking at those values. And that's what scopes does. It basically takes that and reads that. And everybody says, oh, I don't use scopes on set. Well, a monitor itself is a scope, right? It changes an electronic signal into a visual display, and that's all a scope does. Okay, so let's break down what a vectorscope looks like. All right, essentially on the right is a color version of it. So in the center is your white portion. As you get further away, you get deeper into saturation. And the angle is your hue. So for example, on the left, we're seeing the center being white. And as we get further away, we get into our reds, magentas, cyans, etc. And if we take a look at the combination of the orange there on the top left, that's actually a skin tone line where skin tone should basically sit. Okay, and here's the whole point, is that ITU has said where those colors sit. So if you're getting a ITU red, it'll sit in this specific portion of the vectorscope. So you actually have standards, you actually have color reference.
Let's talk
And
about ITU real quick, because you're using that terminology.
Yes.
ITU.
Yeah, ITU is International Telecommunication Union, who set the standards for the video signal. And yes, we don't work in film, we actually work in video. So they are the ones who are setting the standards as to where does red go, where does green go, where does, all of the colors go. So therefore, it's interoperability throughout the whole system. Otherwise, it's just like a carpenter who says, well, I'm going to cut this piece of wood to about the length of my hand. Well, their hand may not be the length of somebody else's hand. So how is that going to match up? Whereas if we do have standards, we know that, for example, if wherever somebody's sending a feed in from Beijing, and it's like coming to us, and it's like, well, because we have these standards the ITU have set, we know that, for example, what's expected of that signal, right, will have interoperability. And they can send a signal here.
And this is super important, because if you're using protocols and pipelines such as 2020 or 709, those are set by ITU. That's an ITU standard. So if you're not using ITU charts like what's seen in this picture, then it's kind of like using a temperature gauge that the little vial of the mercury has slipped. It's not going to be accurate. There's no color accuracy without using a full ITU pipeline. Go ahead, sorry.
And here's the key thing to Sean's point is I can give this image all along the pipeline. And again, people can measure it on their scopes to validate what I sent them is accurate. I obtained what from the beginning accuracy, and I can ensure all the way along that color pipeline that it's maintained. So when you give it to post-production or anything like that, or we're delivering it, it doesn't matter. As long as we can turn around and say, this is our standard, and we all meet that standard. And they can measure it. And if there's any changes, we can see it. Okay, so what happens when we don't have an ITU chart? It's like, what do we calibrate to? What do we calibrate our system to? Is that red ITU? Is that, no, is that red? Is that where it's supposed to be? Is that 75% saturation? Is that 100% saturation? So you don't have anything to calibrate your system on. You don't have anything to evaluate your lights on. Sit back saying, here's the interaction we're having with this camera. We can measure on the scope. And yet, how do we validate that?
Well, they can. There's productivity loss there. So
Yes.
Once again, this is a chart that many people use. Is it ITU compliant in an ITU pipeline? No. It was made for film, actual physical celluloid film. It doesn't have any reference to ITU. Now, look, it does show us color. It does show us color on that vectorscope. But the problem is you're having to define the offsets, and you're slowing down your process, and you'll probably get there. Whether or not you're going to be accurate or not, the other problem is the amount of time taken to try to get color accuracy rather than using appropriate ITU charts in the first place. That's, again, like using an appropriate measuring tape or an appropriate measuring device like a thermometer. 34 degrees is 34 degrees or 0 Celsius all across the world. It's a standard. Yeah. If you use a thermometer that's just a little off, you're not going to have accuracy.
Exactly. Okay, so we're going to break this down. We use what we created, the HS scope, and the HS scope is like a vector scope, but we made it a little bit simpler. So hue is on the bottom, saturation is basically as it rises up towards the top. So you've got a saturation scale and the hue scale. So, for example, this is the camera response. The white line that we have here is the chroma response of this camera seeing this chart. Okay, well, guess what? That white line essentially is the camera's chroma fingerprint. So I can put various lights on it, and if the colors don't line up, then I know that the light's not matching. Right? So here's the original color reference. And again, I evaluate lights by the scopes. Right? So we can store that reference. So that's, again, the camera's chroma fingerprint. Once we've got that, we can see, wait a second here, we're off. And immediately, we can see what's inaccurate. We can see, all right, our reds are oversaturated, our yellows are oversaturated. So when we make adjustments, we're not guessing. The camera is telling us what we need to know.
Yeah, that white line, by the way, everyone, is the reference.
It's a reference line.
So anything that's outside of that white line needs correction.
Okay, so here's a prime example. Which one of these greens are accurate? So, for example, you may have a corporate green on the left. Well, to that point, we've actually stored the hue and saturation value of that green. And we look on the right, and it's like, it's off. We can see exactly what's off. It has to shift a little bit towards the blue, right? And increase saturation a touch. So we can see immediately what's wrong. We're not guessing. As we make adjustments, we will see when we're accurate or not. Right? And in this case here, this is a video of it being adjusted. Our white line is where our green's supposed to be. So we go along and we reduce our saturation and we adjust our hue. And now it's lined up. Oh, our saturation is too little, right? So we need to turn on increase and sort of go from there, right? But it just shows you exactly how you can match it, right?
And this has been a problem in workflows across color color grading, and also especially in CGI work, because, each house is got different monitors. It's got different color pipelines. There's no interoperability between houses unless we use scopes and charts. Go ahead.
And to Sean's point is that you have a lot of monitors on set, and you're going to have variances between them. The one consistency you will have is scopes. So if you refer back to your scopes, there's your validation. Now, when we start talking about what happens when we're talking with Wacom, what happens when we got a tablet and we are going to doing graphics for a video pipeline? Well, guess what? We can actually go in and we can send that signal to the scopes itself because it reads the desktop. So there you go. There's our chart in Paint. I've just got it in the Paint program. And we sit back going, wait a second, that specific green over here is what we want to turn around and match. And we will just highlight it and saying, okay, let's store that chroma fingerprint. This is what the camera is expecting to see. And there it is. And we'll get our reference. And then we will go into the Paint program and said, well, we've got to match that with our color that we're going to choose. So we'll set this and we'll say, okay, there we go. Now I go into the color picker. Again, I'm just using Paint, but you can use any drawing program that you want. I'm just using an example. So now we turn around and go and let's start doing our color. And what I can do is in the HS scope, I can actually draw a window on the colors that I'm dealing with. So I will do that. I will draw this window around the color picker there, and I will sit back going, okay, let's see if it matches that white line. No, it doesn't. We can see immediately we have to shift towards the yellow, and our saturation level is too much. So again, we're not guessing at it. We can be precise. And for example, that green may have been a corporate green color. So we're increasing the saturation, as you can see in our color selection, and we get a fairly good saturation there. Now we have to adjust the hue, right? And we're not guessing. We can sit back as we adjust it. We'll know when it's lined up.
Brad, just so you're aware, someone's asking, can we make the slides larger? Unfortunately not, but this is recorded and you can look at it on a larger monitor later. And we can also potentially provide some slide decks for you.
Yeah. So again, we're just talking about getting accuracy here based on the camera's response. So now if you want to build set extensions that are camera accurate and you've got to draw them up, that's all possible. And of course, we can also look at our luminance value that we can look on the waveform. Okay, now let's have some fun in Unreal, because actually we can take the virtual camera from Unreal and we've got a plugin that we created so we can actually read it on scopes. So here I've got a virtual camera shooting a chart. And here's the whole point. While I make my color adjustments in Unreal, I'm not just doing this by eye. I'm not just looking at a monitor. I'm actually basing it on what the camera sees. So for example, that white line that we have on the top right over there is our camera's chroma fingerprint. And as I make adjustments to the virtual camera, I know that that's not matching. I know that I was oversaturated there. So again, Unreal offers you these abilities to adjust, but are you just doing it by eye? Or if you're incorporating the scopes, now your exposure is accurate. Now your colors are accurate. And you can actually match your virtual camera to your production camera on set.
Hey, Brad, can I give an example of an application here? Because this is really important for CGI. A lot of people are producing a lot of backgrounds for virtual production, or they're trying to integrate visual effects into an on-camera, practical camera, and yet there's no reference between the virtual camera or the colors within the CGI device and the actual chroma footprint of the camera that was used on production. So having, again, a chart shot on set with a camera and importing that chart into your in your CGI, whatever program it may be, whatever application you choose, you have color accuracy now, and we don't have to worry about the expense in correcting it over in VFX or other applications, even in color grading. You can actually use that time more creatively than fixing a lot of the problems that constantly are having. Go ahead.
And to Sean's point, we actually have in the HS scope in the monitor back here of the Arri Alexa, I could store that fingerprint, put it it put it into our scope and adjust the camera in our virtual set to align with that. So again, Sean's not talking abstract. It's like, let's get what we're seeing on set and let's make it actually accurate in our virtual set. And again, here's another example. We start talking about skin tones. We talk different things. The other thing too is that when I start dimming lights or working in lights in Unreal, there's actually an effect to the chroma response, right? We change color temperature. We do that. It might look a little bit different on a monitor when we're looking at Unreal, but we don't know what the effect is to this chroma signal. We don't know if we dim a light, what does that do? And that's the value of scopes. It will tell you immediately if there's an issue and what to correct, right? So again, we start looking at things where, in this case here, we're dealing with actually LUTs. I actually put some LUTs into Unreal and we start saying, okay, well, there's one look from a LUT. Let's look at another one. We can see immediately what shifted. So we jump between the two. It's like, oh, okay. It's not just a matter, oh yeah, the colors changed. Well, what actually affected the chroma signal? As a matter of fact, with this LUT here, our white point has shifted dramatically, right? This is our white point in the center is still accurate there. So it's like, oh, okay, so anything that appears white or whatever in my virtual set will be off. Right?
Brad, there's one question. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
Sure. Go ahead.
There's one question here too that's asking, and I'm not sure what they're asking, but application use for HS scope. Just so people are aware, HS scope, just like many other scopes, let's use vector for instance, which was the original scope for color. That had many improvements were made to those graticles with lightning, many other types of graticles that help us within color and the color space. HS Scope is just another one of those tools. Brad, maybe just, sorry, we probably skipped ahead and didn't really explain what HS Scope was.
Essentially what HS Scope, the reason it makes it easier is that I'm able to store a reference line. So for example, if we go back here, right, you saw, for example, that white reference line. That is the chroma output of the virtual camera. So now that I've got that stored, that means I can match different cameras. I can match lights to that, etc. So essentially, this is what I keep on saying, that it's the camera's chroma fingerprint. That's what it expects to see for that scene.
And you can do this with traditional waveform and vectors, especially if you were a colorist all your life. You've been doing this. This product that Brad has co-produced is just a much easier way to look at both the chroma and luminance. Correct, Brad?
Yeah, no, exactly. And not only that, as I showed before, it makes it easier to sit back and say, well, what's wrong with that red? Again, we're not guessing. It's like, oh, that red needs to shift a little bit towards magenta. It needs to, whatever the case is. So your corrections can be accurate. And just to let you know, there are some times that in Unreal, you're limited in what they offer you with regards to controls of color. I have found you can get it fairly close, but you may have to go to the next step and, and if need be, take it to a DaVinci or something like that. So again, it's much closer than you'd get just by eye on a monitor, right? And again, we start looking at, to Sean's point, the HS scope, for example, on the left has the chroma fingerprint. So what applications does it have? It basically, in Unreal, I can now have my virtual camera matching my on-set camera. So when I start making adjustments in Unreal, to Sean's point, now I can look at and getting a much more closer camera accurate, saving time and money on set for my deliverables. And again, here we have another LUT there. So here's a prime example. That LUT does not line up with the first LUT. So if we look at the white reference line, the up and down hills and valley that we're seeing in the HS scope in the left there, and then we turn on and go, well, let's go to the next LUT. And we can see immediately, well, our magenta's off, our green is off, so it's not matching. So it gives us a direction to move so that we can match it. So if we make adjustments and we align it, then we know that we're matched up. Okay. And again, just like I'm here at SP Studios, the whole color pipeline is not abstract. It's actually being used by virtual production companies from the start of Unreal all the way to the lighting, all the way to the calibrating of the video walls, etc. Oh, let's go here. Now, here's the thing. We've had people say, oh, you can light with a video wall. Well, okay, here's RGB lighting the chart. And if you see in the vectorscope, our white point is there. And even when people start talking about X and Y, it's like, yeah, there's my X and Y. Well, look at all my secondaries. All my other colors are off. That should be a full circle. It's not. It's deficient in blue. It's deficient in yellow, right? So the whole point is I might be able to get a white point, but all my other colors are going to be inaccurate. So no, it's not recommended to light with a video wall. And the RGB, when people talk about it, is that red, green, and blue lined up with the camera? So the red is not too bad. Let's look at the green here that comes out. We'll bring that up and we can see immediately it should be at the where it says G over there with the green is actually in between the green and cyan. So these are the LEDs from the wall itself. It's like, okay, that's a bit off. So again, it's the benefit of scopes. It validates the claims manufacturers make. And as a matter of fact, this is what we did with planar. We did a multi-camera set with red cameras. We calibrated all cameras to be the same, matched. And then we had the chart into the Unreal Engine. We calibrated that. And we calibrated the video wall. Again, so they using our ITU charts and our scopes. So therefore, the camera was saying where we needed to be as far as the chroma response. And we used the HS scope for that to sit back and said, is it lining up? Again, we took the camera's chroma fingerprint, and that was our guideline. Okay, now a lot of people said, oh, there's no shifting in color when you dim a light. Okay, great. Well, what should happen there is that everything goes to the center, right? Yeah, it did, and that's fine. There was no shift. But who validates that? Right? So, for example, this is the manufacturer said there was no shifting. That white point, if you look in the circle there, should really stay, but it shifted off. So yeah, at a certain percentage, it does shift. And again, you get this with different manufacturers. And validating the claims on camera is the only way to turn around and do it. Now, getting back to what I talked about with regards to numbers. Here's a prime example. On the left, frame number 1, we have a 3200 degree Kelvin tungsten light, a real tungsten light. That red box, I'm showing the HS scope reading. So that is the hue and saturation values from that camera shooting the chart, lit by a tungsten source. Now, frame number 2, okay, I use a color meter and I metered my LED light and I'm getting 2970, correlated color temperature. Now, does the hue and saturation values of that light, you can see in that red box there, is the green as much as it is in the 3200? No, it's far more saturated. The hue positions are off. Well, let's go to 3196. How is that? No, my meter is giving me these numbers, great, but the camera's saying, sorry, they don't match. And that's the reason for such things as the HS scope, because I can store that as a white reference lines, and as I showed before, easily say, hey, this doesn't match. In this case here, you look at the frame number 3 there, and it's like, yeah, our cyan is extremely oversaturated, our red's oversaturated, our green's oversaturated. And again, going back to that ball, what that means is, oh, if we have cyan within our costumes, that's going to punch even more, right? Our green is going to be off. So again, they actually affect the total look on camera. Numbers-wise sounds good. I'll go with my color meter and I'll say, oh, these are the numbers. But again, with color, you can paint by numbers, but don't use the numbers to evaluate color on camera. Use scopes. And what does that do when colors are off? It shifts skin tones. Prime example, right? And again, when I talked about, if we look on the vector scope on the left there, we're seeing skin tones, and they're pretty concentrated in the one area where the skin tone line is sitting at. And we can see, for example, our reds, our yellows, which again, skin tone is made up of red and yellow. You have variations of saturation values, but pretty well everybody has red blood in them. So you've got your red and your yellow that make up majority of skin tones. So if you change that and you alter the chroma response by a light that's putting more more red or more yellow or whatever the case, you can shift skin tones, right? Even though, in this case here, for example, our color meter said, oh, it's all fine. It's 3196. No, You have to look at the scopes and see what effect it is. And again, we realize with RGB or any LEDs, they give off a narrow band. Okay, and of course, LED binning, it boils down to the fact that any light that any LED is taken from how close it comes to the accuracy of the light that it was, or the color was destined to. The further away from those colors, then it's a cheaper one, right? So again, if you're talking about red, it's got to be a specific red. And again, you do have manufacturers of a wide variety of LEDs to fill up the spectrum. So very quickly, LED light, 3200 correlated color temperature. On the left is a tungsten light. If we look at the HS scope, they actually line up. So again, we start evaluating lights, etc. That's one of the better things to do. And again, we're looking at color space, right? Where things sit with regards to that. And again, that boils down to Sean was saying, the scopes, because it'll tell you if you're in that color space or not. It'll tell you if those colors are accurate. If you've gone beyond that, which you can do with LEDs, it'll push it beyond the 709. If you're working in that, you're oversaturating the camera, right? You'll be able to tell. Okay. Again, we have 709 and 2020 vectorscopes. So here's the thing. Oh, LUT will fix everything. Well, okay, a LUT is global. How do you fix a LUT when the scene is lit with 3 different lights that are inaccurate, right? Unless you go into building windows and power windows and start adjusting it, a LUT's going to not fix the whole thing. So it's better to fix it in adjust your lights so that they all match to begin with, and using your scopes as your reference.
This is super important. I want people to pay attention to this real closely, because this is a major problem when a DOP does color tests, and that's passed off to art direction and to CGI artists, whether that be background or visual effects groups, and then also off to wardrobe. Color accuracy is important to all departments. And the minute that we have an issue where we do something globally and we try to fix that, it starts shifting color all across the board in all of those departments and the additive qualities that those departments bring to the picture. And hang on, I'm almost there. And the thing is we find ourselves fixing more stuff in color grading due to these anomalies that happened on set, rather than fixing them ahead of time. And most of the work, it not only is an expense to the producer, that's more for fixing things rather than being creative, but we're spending more time fixing things that were easily fixed to begin with than actually being creative. And we don't end up with the actual look in the end that we really were trying to do, because we're trying to figure it out and fix it. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say very quickly, if all of a sudden you wanted everything to match on camera as far as your lights go, then match them using the camera's chroma signal. Once they're matched, then you can put a LUT in and it's global, and you go from there. Now, even if you want to be creative and alter that light, that's fine, but that's your creative choice. Again, we can measure that on the scopes, and therefore we have consistency throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, so reference-based. You start with a reference, and then you add color or you add correction to any of the scenes for the purposes of visual effect. The other thing is if it's there and you shot that chart at a nominal, meaning reference picture, I can also dial it back. We don't get so creative that, oh my gosh, where did we come from? This is totally off from where I was. Well, the scope allows us to bring it back to reality. Go ahead.
And the other thing too is that what it does is it shows intent. A lot of post people have said, hey, if you've got the chart there, I know what look you want it. If you purposely wanted your lights to be off or whatever for this scene or whatever, no problem. I can judge that. And said, good. I save all that time. Now, there's another thing that we start seeing about colors in the camera is in our black levels. People talk about white balance, etc., but nobody talks about black balance, because essentially you can actually get your black levels shifting towards a blue, shifting toward a green or a red. So again, just things to look at, saying is that, all right, again, as we look at our scope there, we start seeing, that black level has shifted towards green, towards red. So there's an issue with that. And that's easy to see. You cap up the camera and you look in your scope, and it should be sitting right in the center, not shifted off the way.
And broadcasters do this all the time with gamma,
Yeah.
but it's really rare to
Yeah.
see anyone do this on motion picture sets.
And the other reason for checking things all along the pipeline is this. Okay. For example, this is the output I had from DaVinci Live. Well, if you look on the right, that's the output I had from NDI signal, and the scopes are totally different. I actually had to adjust my DaVinci Live output, which is not what I would do on that scope there. That's not how it would look. I would want it to look on the right over there, but I had to make that adjustment because NDI was altering the signal. So again, how we check along the whole pipeline is important. I can only validate that with the scope itself, because you start introducing things and it can start altering the signal, right? So the whole thing is saying, well, it's fine here, everything's accurate here. That's great. Let's check along the line. Let's see what we've introduced. You add a new piece of equipment, you do whatever. Did that alter the signal? You can validate that by looking at the scope. Okay, and just very quickly, again, we start talking about ITU, and we start talking about, everyone knows these as simply color bars, but they're there as a tool, as a reference. And we start looking at when we're adjusting a monitor, again, just balancing a monitor, all of these color bars are there as a reference. So for example, plues, we start talking about for our contrast. So we should just see the bar in the middle there, that's 7.5 IRE. IRE is the Institute of Radio Engineers. So again, we start balancing a monitor, not calibrating. Calibrating takes a little bit more, but we start going in and start saying, okay, well, let's look at these values that are in that color bars. So therefore, we've got our contrast, our brightness, and we can judge that as to where our plugage bars go. Again, that 7.5, we should just barely see when we're looking at a monitor. The 3.5 shouldn't be seen, and the 11.5 should just be a gray. And the other sides of that is a black. So there's a feature called blue only in some monitors. And what does that do? So the color bars that you saw there, you saw your color on the top and color on the bottom. Great. When you put blue only, if we look on the left there, we start seeing that those blue lines aren't the same. We've got a little bit of a shift of blue at the bottom. Well, that's why you adjust your hue and saturation values so that they're balanced. So you look at those bars on the right and you start saying, oh, okay, now we're balanced. Now that blue line is all solid all the way through. It gives you a reference when you're adjusting your monitor, so therefore at least it's balanced. Is it calibrated to the point where with a sensor and all that stuff onto the monitor? No, it's not to that level. We're just balancing. And again, there's our plugage, how it should basically looking. We're essentially on the very right, the gray bar, we can just see the center bar just barely, and the other black bars we're not seeing. Okay, and this, for example, is exactly how an ITU chart looks like on the scope. So on the HS scope, we've got the gradation there, and that's one solid line. On the vectorscope, things are sitting in the center. And on our waveform, we've got our 0 black at the bottom, and we've got our peak white at the top at 100%. So that's it for now. And I think we've got question and answers, and we can open it up from that, I think.
I will say that was great. And Sean is a wizard out here just answering everyone's questions. So thank you, Sean, for being Johnny on the spot.
Yeah, well, some of them don't, we're not going to, we could go into some things like what is NDI. NDI is just a protocol. It's commonly used in broadcast, and it's used for it's a compression scheme. It's not uncompressed like 2110. Many people use it for corporate and other regional broadcasts and things like that. Most large broadcasters, the NBC, CBS, ABC, CBC in Brad's case, use uncompressed for the most part for movement within the house, and that's a 2110 protocol. And we tend to see 2110 being introduced within the virtual production space as well. But NDI has its applications, but again, a compressed signal, not very useful in areas for CGI and color accuracy because there's missing information there and artifacts.
Okay, so we got a question from Eric. He was asking, where do we get the plugin for Unreal? That's actually part of the scope package, Eric.
Let's talk about what the scope package is, just so you, who is the scope package? Who is Drastic?
Okay, so yes, we've collaborated with Drastic Technologies. Calibrated and Drastic Technologies work together. I actually worked with them to co-create the HS scope, but they actually produce custom software for broadcasters, for cameras, and they've been doing this for a few decades. So the scope package that we have is one is a 4K scope package. It gives you all of the different scopes, including the HS scope. HDR scope package is again, as it says, 8K HDR, and we have a SMPTE 2110 scope package. In those cases, the plugin for Unreal is part of that package itself. Now, if you download the software and you get a 2-week trial of it, and you say, okay, I don't want it after the 2 weeks, no problem. Guess what? Your waveform and vectorscope are free. They stay with you. When calibrating color on an LED wall, are you sending an ITU chart image to the wall? Yes, as a matter of fact, if you take a look at the wall behind me, that's our chart. That's our digital chart. Yes. So yes, good
actually,
question.
There was a question before asking about that chart, because I'm sure people haven't seen it. That's currently in R&D, and we're improving. The most important thing is to make sure that you have an ITU compliant chart. There are a few of them in the world, but you want to make sure absolutely it's ITU compliant. The chart that you see behind you is in R&D currently, and it's something that will be available fairly soon, and there's some improvements that we found, some deficiencies within other charts that we're doing, and so that's what you're seeing in the background.
So to Brian's thing, and yeah, we put the chart in the wall, and then we shoot it with a camera. As a matter of fact, if you look at the in the scopes behind me up here, and actually I'll stop sharing that. We'll become large.
Yeah, you can't see yet.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so I'm not muted. So if we take a look at this, this is the Arri Alexa shooting this chart. So we shot the chart, we looked at the scopes, got the chroma fingerprint of the camera, and we adjusted in the Brompton video processor. We adjusted the video wall until it all lined up. So yes, Brian, that's exactly what we ended up doing here at SP Studios. They adopted this whole process methodology. And again, I'm going to be working further with the Unreal artists as we work into the plugin. How come my small bear pattern camera always struggles with look at bright yellow on a LED wall? It's seen as white, whereas the 3 chips. Yeah, that gets into the matrix and the response of your camera itself. Because not only that is the bear signal being sent out, but then you debear it. In other words, the processor itself has to figure out how it's dealing with that signal itself. So I don't know exactly which camera you're talking about, but yes, it could be the setup of the camera. So where do we get ITU compliant charts aside from y'all? Well, there are some other places around. I just wouldn't say that the Macbeth chart is the one way to turn on go. Okay, Brian, this makes you happy.
Let's add to that. Let's add to that, because that's really important. Why do we even say that? Why do we even mention that? That chart, once again, just like data sheets have appropriate things on them, but do they pertain to your application? That chart is a color chart. It absolutely is a measurable device. It has accuracy, but does it pertain to your workflow and how we use it within a 2020 or a 709? Absolutely not. It is not ITU compliant. And so, therefore, saying that it's the wrong chart is totally inappropriate. It is the right chart for the right application. I want to make that very clear. We're not saying that, you're using the wrong. It's not a color chart. It's not a color chart that's appropriate for the process that you're involved in. Brad, do you want to add anything to that, or did I cover that?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's it. It's giving you colors, but are you going to calibrate your system to it? And that's where the difference. So, for example, I would not put the Macbeth chart in the video wall and calibrate to, because it's not a reference. I would not put the Macbeth chart in Unreal because I'm not calibrating to that.
What's really amazing is how many people who call themselves color scientists, who I hear all of these presentations talking about color accuracy, And then the first thing we see is a Macbeth chart, which is made for chemical process. Instantly, it
Yeah.
validates, whether or not this information is true or not, because it's very obvious. Look, we don't make these standards. This isn't our personal opinion. This is the opinion of the ITU, the Universal Committee on Color and Color Alignment, and who created 2020 and 709. If you don't believe us, go talk to the committee. I mean, we're just really providing the resource to you to go. And the other thing I'm asking is put them up against each other and you make the decision which one you want to. I'm not selling you on anything here. I want you to go and make a decision for yourself. As far as where do you get ITU compliant charts, all of your outlets that sell charts are going to have ITU compliant charts as well as Macbeth charts. Again, just remember, what application are you trying to use it for? If you're working in our environment with cameras and trying to match cameras to walls, or do color accuracy for color grading, or you're trying to match CGI to cameras, and you're using 2020 or Rec 709, then you better be using an ITU compliant chart. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm not going to talk about sales outlets and things like that on our site.
And Salvador is asking, how do we know the SDI luminance and chroma space from the camera is okay? How do we know that the LED wall is calibrated itself? What is the color chart for HDR PQ? Well, actually, we are looking at getting a color chart even for 2020. We're going to turn around and make that right now. This is just 709. How do we know that the luminance and color space from the camera is okay? Okay is what's determined by the manufacturer. So in other words, what we're saying is that this is what the ARRI camera is outputting. Whether they put all skin tones where it should be defined as, so to speak, no, they may do their own look. But if we turn around, if we know what their camera chroma fingerprint is from an ARRI, and it's different between different cameras, right, then we sort of go from there.
Oh, that's another important part. If you're trying to match cameras on set, some cameras, especially broadcast or unique things, some sporting events and things like that. Look, that is actually a live set behind him. Look at that. It's really nice to be able to have a chroma fingerprint of your primary cameras, and then be able to bring in other smaller form factor cameras. Maybe it could even be stunts, and be able to chroma match those as much as possible prior to going into your color session, because you're going to save a ton of money.
And I was going to say, just a note, SP Studios have a few cameras here. We've calibrated this wall to the ARRI. We also have a calibration to the Sony Venice. They also have a red camera. So we've actually gone in and looked at the chroma fingerprint, the chroma response of those cameras. We've calibrated that and stored those looks for the different cameras themselves. So to Salvador's point, how do we know it's okay? Is, again, we look at what the camera is responding to. We know where the standard should be sitting to. Now, ARRI may put skin tones or its red shift a little bit different, but that's fine, because essentially we're starting off with the chart itself that we know is a standard. We know where that red should be. ARRI may put it a different place. That's fine. They're altering the chroma fingerprint that they want for their look. Thank you, David. Okay, and somebody talked about a drone with regards to why it's again. It depends on the matrix of the camera and how they've looked at that. Now, whether you can go in and adjust it in the camera is a key. Like, for example, even the camera that I've got on me, I go in and adjust it the R minus G and the G minus R and all that stuff in the matrix of the camera itself to adjust for the camera's response. I can just go by the default if I want to, but because I've got the scopes, I can go and adjust it to specifically that I want. Do you have comparisons of an ITU chart seen through various LUTs and camera types? Well, I did a little bit in that demo with regards to what I showed you with the LUTs in Unreal. But again, LUTs themselves are going to be global changes. So the point is if you do have an ITU chart, and you've put it up there in front, and then you do a LUT on top of it, you'll be able to read that on your scope itself, and you'll be able to see exactly where those colors shifting. So I would defer back to the little example I did in the Unreal example where I went with the LUTs in there. But on camera itself, no, we haven't started putting LUTs into this stuff yet. It would be nice to understand the difference.
I would,
Camera.
Brad, would you agree that I would shoot the chart uh, completely
Clean.
normal, clean?
Yeah.
So you have a reference for your visual effects team as well as your your color grading team, so they have a color reference and basically the fingerprint of that camera.
Yes.
And then go and do all of your special LUTs and all of your camera tests. I think if you're missing the clean camera reference, you're going to spend a lot of time fixing things in color, which equals money. And rather than being creative in your color session, you're doing fixes. You're going to save a ton of time, and you're going to get a lot of value out of enhancing your project in the creative space if you do that. One more thing, somebody said, and it was a little bit of a joke, but I don't joke about it. Macbeth is cheaper, therefore too many people have it. Yes and no. Let's talk about cheap. I like this.
Well, actually, here's something: is that crew is cheap too. You can get a cheaper crew.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I was going at. Like, really, when we start introducing the wrong temperature gauge into a car that's a Formula One race car, we're going to have all kinds of problems, and departments are all going to try to be troubleshooting what the problem is, and then it's going to go over to engineers across the world, and they're going to try to figure out. The whole point of all of this is interoperability, standards-based measurement. So it's not just about the chart. It's about how much money we're spending in fixing things across all the departments and how much that chart costs. So it blows my mind that people don't want to spend $1,000 one-time expense over hundreds of productions. I wonder how much money they spend in correction and issues with color across all departments when they're vetting the cost of a chart. Anyway, thank you.
So Catherine, you were on about you come from broadcast environment. Well, yes, I also come from a broadcast environment also. So knowing the different fingerprints of cameras and LUTs, it really boils down to this. This is the whole thing with what the HS scope and the scopes themselves and shooting the chart will show you is essentially what is that fingerprint itself. It'll tell you here's our hue response, here we report it, and here's our saturation values of it. So each chroma fingerprint of the camera is different. Now we can go into some cameras, into the matrix of the camera, and adjust them so that they hit those points that they should be. But for example, Arri has its look, Sony has its look. It's defined where those things are. In the case of broadcast cameras, we will go in and we will actually adjust the different portions of the chroma signal, like R minus G, G minus R, etc. So therefore, we are altering where that portion of the signal goes to. And again, we line them up in the graticule where they should be as far as ITU puts them. That's also the sort of standard with broadcasting, so that all cameras hit that same point.
Also, back to expensive charts and the expense of a chart and the different types of charts available. Broadcast, especially in multi-camera, we're dealing with very large size charts, and these charts are very customized. They're incredible alignment standards, just like you would expect with any laboratory instrument. I call them instruments because that's what they are. They're so color accurate. And so when you're dealing with a small chart, that's a little easier than dealing with a very large chart. Not to mention printing a large chart, there's a little bit more involved, and so the costs go up. But again, the cost of a $3,000 to $4,000 chart that's very large for a multi-camera shoot across a stage, for instance, if you're doing it in a stadium or a large stage and you have 20 cameras pointing at the same chart, that's why you have a larger chart. Again, that chart is really going to pay itself off in regards to the reciprocal cost that you're going to occur in correcting stuff down the road. But anyway, there's a lot of charts for a lot of applications. Go ahead, Brad.
No, I was going to say, and in case in point with SP Studios, they added a portion of the wall and they had some newer panels in, and they wanted to match the older panels. And that's why they went with the chart. And the scopes. They said they wanted accurate on camera. And the quickest, most accurate way to turn around doing it was having a standards reference chart and the scopes in combination. If we look at the HS scope up here, we start seeing it's almost a flat line as far as the response goes. And we look at the chroma response on the vectorscope, the white is sitting in the center, and all the other colors are proportional to where they should be. Now, again, ARRI has its own look. It'll take a yellow and maybe give a little more saturation here and there. That being the case, again, realizes that because we've got that standard, this is what the ARRI is expecting. But we started off with that correct chart in the video wall. We're not going, well, that blue is off. What do we adjust it? It's like, no, that blue is accurate to where it should be.
And you bring up a really good point. Let's talk about when we're shooting, and this is happening a lot now because we're a global market. We're not just doing things in Los Angeles. We are seeing projects across the world. What this allows, if you shoot something in one stage with one camera with a serial number, you can get that chroma footprint, store it, send it across the world to the UK stage, and dial that same camera in, another camera in from another house, and almost accurately match those two cameras. So that's a good example of how using this for reference, again, a clean reference, and for camera alignment. I wish people would use these charts when they go in and do their lens checks and things like that within the camera house. That's the place to do a flat basically. Go ahead.
Yeah, and no, it's because the other thing too is that we're not limiting people's creativity. We want people to be creative. As Shaw's point says, we can always get back to the starting point. If I want, I can take this and make it any color I want and change it all for whatever creative reason. I can put my skin tones blue. I can do whatever the case is. That's fine. But I can also measure that on the scope and say, this is what we had yesterday. You like that look. Let's make sure we're getting that all the way through. But then when you sit back and say, oh, we've gone way too far. Let's just take everything, reset it back. We have that ability on the scopes. Okay, let's go reset everything back and we can validate where it is. So for example, in this case here, this is the look that we have in the scopes. What if we alter things up, right? Okay, good. I will know what I've altered, but I know when I'm back to square one, right? We're not just going by eye anymore.
Yeah. The other thing that we love to point out is we do a lot of shootouts with lights and cameras. And no matter what manufacturer says to you, these are all accurate, they're all the same, prove it. Just validate that claim. Stop listening to marketing. Put it on a scope and look at it. They are going to, electronics are electronics. They're going to drift. They're going to come off the manufacturing line wrong. Just because they're electronics, they're going to change. The other thing that happens is humidity, temperature of the environment you're in is going to make one camera different from another. And so even if you brought the same camera from Los Angeles to UK, it potentially is going to drift. So this again allows you to accurately, color accuracy to ITU compliance, kind of flatline that camera and make sure that you have a good start point. And this also moves into CGI as well. Not every computer is going to have the same output. So the only way that you're actually going to see the output is to have a scope behind it and making sure that red is red and that it's ITU compliant red, not your house's compliant red, because there's no interoperability to your house's compliant red.
And I've been purposely playing with the LED light that's lighting me to go up and down and change it. The reason being is that which one is right? Right? How do we know when we're right? Are we looking by eye? Does that look good? Does this look good, etc.? But at least with the scopes, we can sit back going, okay, this is accurate, this is not. And again, maybe I want this blue look on skin tones. Great. Well, here's the benefit. If I end up shooting the chart here, right, with this light, and I'm saying that's the look that I want, when I turn around and give it to post, they're going, oh, okay, yes, you wanted that look. That's great. I'm not there to correct it. So for example, maybe our background is the same, but whatever the case is, I'm a zombie and we want this blue look on whatever, that's fine. We can make our variations, but we can actually go along and measure that. That's the whole point. I was going to say,
for a minute there, Brad, you looked like you were getting toasty. It was on fire in that set.
No, but again, we don't want to go by eye. We want to turn around and make it accurate.
One last thing on the Unreal thing is Brad had he was trying to dial in using the tools within Unreal, and those tools were limited and didn't allow for full correction. So I said, well, let's just throw it into DaVinci then, which has a much larger color tool quiver, should I say. And sometimes you do need to use additional nodes. Sometimes you do need to use two pieces of equipment to get complete accuracy. But it worked. Brad, you want to give just a team? I know we're out of time, but let's.
Oh no, yeah,
No,
no,
you're
just,
good.
no,
Yeah.
no,
Okay.
just very quickly. It was quicker to turn around and do. We knew exactly where the issues were, and we can adjust it and correct it, as compared to an unreal artist who's just looking at a screen that's not calibrated, not whatever. At least with the scopes, you can go along, sit back, and say, "Oh yes, that's shifted here. This doesn't work here. I need to adjust." Like for example, the virtual camera had too much green in it, so okay, in DaVinci we could turn and take that out. Things like this.
And we're working with Wacom as well in some monitor accuracy products. There's some really interesting things that are possibly going to come your way. I can't really speak to it, and I don't know whether it's going to be implemented or not. But believe me, this company really respects accuracy, and I just want to thank you guys too as well.
Yeah.
And thank you for inviting us onto this platform. I think it's very important that we get this message out to people and get these resources out to people. And we appreciate Wacom taking color accuracy so applying so much importance to it,
Of
and
course.
also incorporating it into your product and trying to
Right.
meet that spec.